Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Paula Farmer of Book Passage. Welcome to what promises to be a very special Book Passage event in honor of and celebration of Juneteenth. This is special not only because of the stellar lineup of authors presenting, but also because of the event's unique format. For today's event, the authors will be individually presenting their original reflections about the holiday. When we close, we will give you a chance to ponder what the speakers have presented while listening to a beautiful original song performed by an immensely talented musician-singer. Juneteenth, also known as Freedom Day, is a holiday commemorating the emancipation of those who were enslaved in the United States. More accurately, it's acknowledging when those that were enslaved in Texas received the news of their freedom much later. Until very recently, this historical milestone was only observed in Texas. Thankfully and rightfully, it is garnering more attention, celebrated annually on June 19th. And as of 2021, President Biden acknowledged it as an official federal holiday. Unsurprisingly, many Black writers, authors, and activists are reflecting, embracing the holiday, and elevating the demarcation. There are those who are questioning it. Either way, they are approaching the subject in the way they do best, with their pens, their voices, and talents. As such, Book Passage is giving a platform to invited guest writers of acclaim to share their thoughtful reflections about Juneteenth through the written and spoken word. Not all of the writers were able to participate in today's event, but all of them have their essays on a dedicated page on the Book Passage website. Go to bookpassage.com to look at all of those presented. And I encourage you to definitely do it. We will start things off with poetry in honor of the holiday. The Stuff of Astounding, a poem for Juneteenth, is by Patricia Smith and will be presented by Nia McAllister. Nia is a poet, writer, environmental justice advocate working at the intersection of art, activism, and public engagement. She is also the public programs manager for the Museum of African Diaspora in San Francisco. Nia?
My name is Nia McAllister, and I'll be reading the poem, The Stuff of Astounding, a poem for Juneteenth by Patricia Smith. Unless you spring from a history that is smug and reckless, unless you vowed yourself to blind to a ceaseless light, you see us. We are a shade-shine toddler writhing through Sunday sermon. We are the grizzled elder gingerly unfolding his last body. We are intent and insistent upon the human in ourselves. We are the doctor on another day at the edge of reason, coaxing a wrong hope, ripping open a gasping body to find air. We are 5 men dripping from the burly branches of young trees, which is to say that we dare a world that is both predictable and impossible. What else can we learn from the suicides of the cuffed, the soft targets black backs be? Stuck in its rhythmic, unreal, time keeps including us, even as our aged root is doggedly plucked and trampled, cursed by ham-fisted spitters in the throes of a particular fever. See how we push on as enigma, the free out loud, the audaciously unleashed, how slyly we scan the sky, all that wet voltage and scatters of furious star to realize that we are the recipients of an ancient grace. No, we didn't begin to live when on the 19th June day of that awkward, ordinary spring, with no joy, and a monotone still flecked with deceit, seems you and these others are free. That moment did not begin our breath. Our truths, the ones we'd been birthed with, had already met reckoning in the fields as we muttered tangled nouns of home, We rebelled in Black from there to now. Our rampant hue and nap, the unbridled breath that resides in the rafters from then to here. Everything we are is the stuff of astounding. We are a mother who hums snippets of gospel into the silk curls of her newborn. We are the harried sister on the elevator to the weekly paycheck mama dreamed for her. We are Black in every way there is, perm and kink, upstart and elder, wide voice, fervent whisper. We heft our clumsy homemade placards. We will not curl small in the gloom, weeping to old blues ballads. We swear not to be anybody else's idea of free, lining up precisely, waiting to be freed again and again. We are breach and bellow, resisting a silent consent as we claim our much of America, its burden and snarl, the stink and hallelujah of it, its sicknesses and safe words, all its Black and otherwise. Only those fiending blindness fail to see the body of work we are and the body of work we have done. Everything is what it is because of us. It is misunderstanding to believe that free fell upon us like a blessing, that it was granted by a signature, an abruptly opened door. Listen to the 1,000 ways to say Black out loud. Hear a whole people celebrate their free and fragile lives, then find your own place inside that song. Make the singing matter.
I had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing our next guest for the launch of her debut nonfiction book, The Three Mothers: How the Mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin Shaped a Nation. Anna Malika Tubbs is an author, advocate, educator, and scholar. She has published articles on topics ranging from celebrating motherhood to the importance of feminism and inclusivity. Her work has been featured in Time Magazine, The Huffington Post, and much more. Anna joins us now.
Happy Juneteenth, everyone. My name is Anna Malika Tubbs, and I'm the author of The Three Mothers: How the Mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin Shaped a Nation. And here is my reflection on this incredible day. Telling history in an accurate way that confronts both the ugliness as well as the beautiful stories of power and joy that have pushed against it is one of the most important missions of our time. It is too easy for too many to gloss over histories of injustice in attempts to erase the paths that have led to where we are as a nation and a world today. Every time we celebrate Juneteenth, we are not only honoring the emancipation of slaves and bringing attention to a day that symbolizes freedom much more wholly than the 4th of July. We are also fighting the disastrous effects of historical amnesia. We are keeping our stories alive, making sure they are being told with accuracy. We are celebrating that we have overcome while setting our eyes on what is left to accomplish in our fight for justice, in our pursuit to live life with dignity. Juneteenth is filled with reminders. The fact that many in our nation still do not know what the day signifies is a reminder of just how important it is that we proudly celebrate it and grow the awareness of its significance for those around us. The fact that some may be tempted to celebrate emancipation as if we are not still being kept from living full lives where we are not treated as all human beings should be is a reminder of how much work is left to be done. And the fact that on June 19th, we come together in joy across the country to uplift one another is a reminder of the revolutionary power of our shared love. It is what sustains us in this tug of war between the ugly and the beautiful.
Thank you, Anna. Next, Brian Copeland is an award-winning actor, comedian, author, playwright, television and radio talk show host based in San Francisco. Copeland debuted his first one-man play, Not a Genuine Black Man, at the Marsh in San Francisco several years ago. The play explored his childhood experiences as a member of one of the only African American families living in the predominantly white suburb of San Leandro, California. Brian is a friend of the store and has been a panelist on the first two Race in America panel events for Book Passage. Thank you for joining us again, Brian.
When I think of Juneteenth, I think of how I have kind of a complicated history with that holiday. I grew up in the East Bay, in the town of San Leandro, which I've written about extensively in my book, Not a Genuine Black Man. And I grew up from grade school through high school as the only Black face in the room. And in elementary school and in high school, what they taught us about slavery was that slavery happened and that Black people were considered chattel until 1865, when Abraham Lincoln in all his glory signed the Emancipation Proclamation and we were free. And then later on, it'll pop up that there was Jim Crow and that Dr. King was able to get the 1964 Civil Rights Act signed, which in fact ended Jim Crow in America and made us all equal. I mean, that's really what it is that I was taught in schools, schools that had white faculty and schools that had white administrators and white teachers and everyone in my class being white. And I was embarrassed. I grew up embarrassed as the son of slaves because, as I said, I was the only Black face in the room. So anytime we were reading something in school, you know how you read aloud and you read a sentence or a paragraph and the person sitting behind you reads one aloud and so forth. Anytime the word slave or slavery would come out, every white head in the room would turn and would look at me. And so I had like this shame, this sense of shame that came along with that. And I had never heard of Juneteenth. I had a grandmother who was born in Jim Crow Birmingham in 1921. The last slave in our family that we were able to document through census records was my grandmother's grandfather, who was 15 at the emancipation. But other than that, I knew nothing about slavery, about our history, and I'd never heard of Juneteenth. I was in my late 20s. I was probably maybe 29, and I was hosting a late night show for the PBS affiliate in San Francisco. And our executive producer was African American. And one day she said something to me about Juneteenth, and I said, "What's that?" And she looked at me like I was out of my mind. "How could you not know this?" And I never heard of it. Nobody's ever said anything. I never learned anything about it in school. It was never mentioned around my house. And I'm really surprised that grandma never said anything about it. And to this day, my grandmother passed away 15 years ago. I don't know if grandma was even aware of it, to be completely honest with you. So I did some research and found out what Juneteenth was. And then over the years, as I learned more about that date and I learned more about slavery and about the truth of slavery as opposed to the sanitized version that I was taught as a child, instead of being ashamed or of being angry, it filled me with a sense of pride. And where the sense of pride comes from is knowing that my forebears went through so much and were so strong, because it was only the strong that survived, 400 years of slavery, then another 100 years of Jim Crow and everything else, that my forebears have this incredible strength and this innate dignity that they carried with them that enabled me to be here today. So, so in a way, I feel like those people in Texas who were the last to know that they were free, however long it was after the emancipation, but before they were finally notified. I kind of relate to them because here it is. I just, found out, and it's been over 20 years, of course, now since I've known, but at the time I was so late and so, behind the curve in terms of finding out about Juneteenth and the significance of that day. Um, what I think is really special about it today is the fact that it's only the second federal holiday that really recognizes people of color. And the first, of course, being Dr. King's birthday, which we spent so many years fighting, and so many years fighting some of the southern states. And I remember when Arizona was the last holdout, and it was like years because there had to be boycotts of sporting events and things in Arizona before Arizona signed off so that all 50 states recognized Dr. King. Juneteenth just kind of sailed through, surprisingly. There was not that kind of fight for Juneteenth to be a holiday. What I do find disconcerting is that I will from time to time hear commentators, if I'm flipping channels and I inadvertently flip past Fox News or flip past a commentator of that ilk, I will hear them say something along the lines of, "Oh, Juneteenth is just a made-up holiday." And I thought about that for a minute. Well, wait, every holiday is a made-up holiday. Holidays are not just suddenly, they don't just drop from heaven, and God has decreed and has dropped from heaven that December 25th is Christmas, or that this particular date in January is going to be President's Day, or this is Valentine's Day. All holidays are made up holidays. It's the people decide that they're going to commemorate something on a particular day. So I just think that that's so funny that that's all that they have to denigrate Juneteenth, was to say that it's made up. Yes, it's made up. So's Christmas. But I'm happy and I'm proud. And I am grateful that yet we have another, out of all of the federal holidays we have one, a second one that celebrates the pride and the contributions of people of color. So with that, I say, happy Juneteenth.
This next presenter is one of my favorite people and activists. She too has been a participant for several special panel events for Book Passage. Aya De Leon is an acclaimed writer of prose and poetry. She directs the Poetry for the People program, teaching creative writing at UC Berkeley. She is known for her award-winning feminist heist romance series, Justice Hustlers. She first came to national attention as a spoken word artist in the underground poetry scene. Aya?
Juneteenth has always been powerful for me. Juneteenth has always been powerful for me because it's a holiday that celebrates a delayed reaction. Enslaved African people in the U.S. had been declared free, and it took a while for the news to get to us. This is the day of celebration for when we became aware of how free we already were. I think that this year, Juneteenth is more important than ever. Steve Phillips said it in his book, Brown is the New White, how the demographic revolution created a new American majority. People of color and progressive whites already form a new American majority that could win any election in any state in the U.S. That is to say, we could win any free and fair election, which is why there's so much voter suppression. And a big part of that voter suppression is that we haven't yet gotten or internalized the message that we can win, that we are free, and that we are in a position to usher in legislation and representatives who will enact policy to initiate, deepen, and enshrine our freedom. From abortion access to free health care to forgiving student loan debt to affordable child care to abolishing ICE and defunding police and ending the prison industrial complex to ending our dependence on fossil fuel and stopping the climate crisis. We can transform this nation and serve the needs of the people And if we organize to meet the needs of Black people, we can meet the needs of everyone. You might ask, well, why am I talking about the climate crisis? Shouldn't I be talking about Black issues? But so many Black lives have already been lost and impacted by the climate crisis. On the Gulf Coast, in the South, in the Caribbean, on the African continent, it is precisely the anti-Black racism that allows our political leaders to treat Black people and the places we live as acceptable sacrifices to the climate crisis. We need to take action on the climate emergency now, and we need to implement policy that is rooted in justice for Black communities. We will not sacrifice Black lives or accept false solutions that perpetuate unjust social and economic systems. Climate justice is racial justice. We are free already. We have everything we need. Let's do this.
Aya thankfully gave us current political perspective of Juneteenth, where our next guest will give us some historical context. Kia Corthron is an award-winning playwright and novelist. Her plays have been produced in New York and across the US and internationally. Her 2021 novel, Moon and the Mars, is a stunning story of family and community, of Africans and Irish, of slavery and abolition, of city and nation racked by civil war and racist violence, of love won and lost. Please welcome Kia Corthron.
Hello, my name is Kia Corthron, and I'm the author of Moon and the Mars. As the pandemic raged in mid-June 2020, some national archivists made a momentous discovery in their stacks, the original Juneteenth document. The handwritten message, read aloud by U.S. Major General Gordon Granger in Galveston on June 19, 1865, was brief and graceless. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freed men are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. It reads less like a celebration of freedom than as an admonition to the newly freed not to get too carried away with this emancipation thing. I'd never heard of Juneteenth until well into adulthood, but I'd certainly often pondered how word got out on Lincoln's '63 decree, entrusting its dissemination to slaveholders. When I was 13, I saw the TV movie adaptation of Ernest J. Gaines' The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. And one of the handful of scenes that stayed with me was the begrudging plantation master's reading of the Emancipation Proclamation to his Black bonded servants. I couldn't imagine that every master so faithfully, if resentfully, followed the law. In researching my novel, Moon and the Mars, I came across the Battle of Poison Spring, a Civil War encounter in Arkansas pitting the 29th Texas Cavalry against the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry, the same company that had whipped the Texas unit the year before. That they had been defeated by a Black corps was an unbearable humiliation for the Confederates. So in the Arkansas confrontation, Texas was savagely vengeful, applying barbarisms such as crushing the skulls of dead and dying Black soldiers by rolling wagons over them. The rebels justified their atrocities in part by the Black regiment's alleged local looting, apparently mostly or wholly a false accusation. There had been plundering by white Union soldiers, but what the Black volunteers had done was much more insidious to the Rebs, informing every slave they happened upon of the existence and ratification of the Emancipation Proclamation. Freedom is subjective. One populace's illusion of safety may be predicated on law enforcement's restriction of and brutality against another community. Freedom is by whims doled out and snatched back, as with recent policies and proposals toward eviscerating voting rights gained at the cost of countless lives. So Juneteenth to me is a recognition of the first sentence of that 19th century Galveston communique, a promise of freedom, which, as African Americans know well, is conditional. It is ours so long as we remain ever vigilant in the struggle to keep it.
Thank you for that. Our next guest, Robert Jones Jr., is no less than a 2021 National Book Award finalist for his debut novel, The Prophets, a story of Black queer love between two enslaved men on a Southern plantation. He has also written for numerous publications, including the New York Times, Essence, the Paris Review, and many more. He shares with us just how complex Juneteenth as a holiday is within the Black community.
My name is Robert Jones Jr., author of The Prophets, and I would like to thank Book Passage for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and feelings about Juneteenth as a concept, as a day, and as a holiday. You know, I sort of have a very complex and complicated relationship to Juneteenth. So on the one hand, I understand why it must be recognized. This is a period of time that commemorates the news finally being received by our enslaved ancestors in Texas that they were free. And in my estimation, free should appear in quotation marks. And so this news got to them a little later than it did the rest of the country by virtue of the systems of communication and such. And they celebrated once they learned that they were free. But part of my reticence in accepting that as a true celebration is because I know what comes after in terms of how my ancestors would continue to be enslaved in various ways. You have to remember that the 13th Amendment says slavery is outlawed except in the case of punishment for a crime. And that was a convenient loophole for politicians and others to re-enslave my ancestors. Additionally, there was a period of out and out terrorism that followed the end of slavery, in which some say still lasts to this very day, when you think about the ways in which unarmed Black people are gunned down by state agents. So on the one hand, I do want to recognize the news being received by my ancestors that they were free. But then on the other hand, I'm resentful of the fact that it's a holiday, because it almost seems as though it's a symbolic gesture when we live in a time where real concrete actions are required. So we cannot be assured of our rights to vote. We cannot be assured of our safety from the violence of the state, but we can have a holiday where Walmart can make some ice cream and we can have t-shirts and whatever else, all of these material commodified things, but we can't have the one tangible thing that we actually need in this country, which is freedom from oppression. And so when I think about gestures like making Juneteenth a federal holiday, or even the idea of Harriet Tubman appearing on a $20 bill, they strike me as empty. And they remind me so keenly of the ways in which I am still not considered a full human being in this society. And so that is my bittersweet, complicated relationship to Juneteenth. Thank you.
What an honor it is to have Robert as part of this program, and we so appreciate that perspective. September Williams is someone I've gotten to know over the past several years and have come to admire her personally and professionally for her boundless work and commitment to family and community. She is a physician, writer, bioethicist, and a filmmaker. Her novel, Chasing Mercury, a romance suspense about families committed to human rights and environmental justice. It is part of an ongoing environmental themed trilogy that she is soon to present. And now she joins us from Oakland.
Greetings, I'm September Williams, and I am going to read for you a piece called Love Letter to My Juneteenth Baby. Juneteenth reminds me that I am a member of the last generation of my family who has had direct contact with one of us close to our slave roots. On Juneteenth, 1990, I gave birth to a baby who was born a woman unlikely ever to be enslaved. Nor is there any evidence that she will stand by and allow anyone to be captured on her watch. I've recently been working on a film about a 99-year-old Black man who was nearly lynched at age 12 because he was born to make change. It took me a long time editing to understand that my attraction to this story is that resolve in the old man's eye that I also see in my daughter. My great-grandfather, Luther, was born in 1900. I knew him. He gave me a pocket knife when I was in medical school in 1980, saying a woman should always have a knife because you never know when you might need one. There were no platitudes about feminism. He wasn't talking about using the gift as a scalpel or a makeshift tool, but a weapon. It was the first time I'd spoken with my great-grandfather as an adult. Grandfather Luther's mother, my great-great-grandmother, was born in 1867 outside of slavery. However, Luther also knew his grandmother, who was born a slave in Texas. Now that Grandfather Luther has died, there is no direct connection to our slave family line living. Yet, our anti-slave presence is running strong, beginning with our not enslaving ourselves. 4 months before my daughter's birth on June 19, 1999, she apparently felt it was inappropriate for me to be up running around in a hospital emergency room in the middle of the night. She threw me into preterm labor. This knocked the long-suffering overachiever gotta show 'em I can do it all and better, i.e. a twisted version of slavery, right out of me. Months later, when my daughter was ready, anticipating a long labor, we stopped at a pizza parlor for lunch next to the hospital. Her father, our 2-year-old son, my dear medical colleague cum sister from Argentina, her 4-month-old daughter, and her marvelous mother were all with me. Just as the pizza arrived, the elder mother noticed I was contracting. I never got to eat that pizza. Luckily, my baby's father, also a physician, delivered my beautiful Juneteenth baby while the nurse was calling my obstetrician. I learned from my Juneteenth baby that slavery does not end because someone's government or job changes a constitution, fights a war, or gives a general order. Slavery ends because slaves decide they will not take it anymore, and then they just don't. Freedom, like health, is determined in large part by the recipient's resolve. For me, Juneteenth will always mean generations of my and many other families taking charge. The key is guaranteeing the next generation is always more able to be agents of progressive change than the one that came before. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have a lot of New York Times best-selling and award-winning authors who submitted reflections for this program. Next up is no exception. He has a BFA in fiction and an MFA in poetry. He is the author of 3 novels. His 2021 release, Hell of a Book, won the National Book Award for Fiction that year. Although Jason couldn't be with us to read his piece, he has an impressive stand-in in the form of a Bay Area high school student, Grayson Maine. Grayson is an avid surfer, a world traveler, and a dedicated student. Lucky for us, in addition to having a passion for all sports, he loves reading. Grayson personally selected Mr. Mott's piece to read because although he's just a young high school student, he said he could connect and relate to the piece. Grayson?
Growing up a little black boy in a small town in the South, I'd never heard of Juneteenth. It wasn't taught to me in school, and even though my parents owned copies of Ebony Practical History of Black America, I never stumbled across the page that Juneteenth was on, if it was even in there. Fast forward to 1996, there's 18-year-old me in a club at 1 a.m. trying to learn what it means to be me, surrounded by a sweaty, heaving mass of black bodies, all of us moving hips and nodding heads and making sure nobody dares step on your shoes while Outkast raps about escalators and Cadillacs. So loud the bass shakes the air from your lungs, and somewhere on the edges of the moment, maybe at the bar, maybe in the line for the bathroom, maybe out in the parking lot, lost one burning with the homies, stands the ghost of one of those Juneteenth slaves. He watches the young black bodies dance. He watches us lose ourselves in the music. He watches unshackled feet in 96 Jordans and Air Maxes thump out the bass lines. He watches unshackled arms and hands rocking FUBU wave beneath the dim club lights. He sees no whip marks across our backs, even though we are all whipped by this country every day. He sees no tobacco cropping calluses on our hands, even though we are being hardened by this country every day. He only sees set free by the base and the knowledge that all the weight that we carry as Black kids in white America does not exist within these walls, so long as the lights stay low and the music stays loud. Someone sees the ghost. They walk up to him and say, "You good, cuz?" He wipes his tears. When did he start crying? The music rises even louder. Outkast raps the words he cannot find to say, and the entire club of black bodies and souls dances before his weeping eyes. Juneteenth, yeah, we got those.
Grayson, we appreciate so much that you stepped up to the plate and read on behalf of Jason Mott. I really hope you remember this experience with great fondness. Next, Julie Lithcott-Hames is no stranger to the book passage stage, in person or online, as she is a Bay Area resident who is one of the best nonfiction writers around and a favorite of the store. I have had the honor to introduce Julie several times. Her books focus on themes of parenting and adulting, race and racism. Please welcome Julie Lithcott-Hames.
Hi, I'm Julie Lifcott-Hames, and I'm grateful to Book Passage for inviting me to be a part of this beautiful event. I'm an author of nonfiction. I've written 3 books. How to Raise an Adult is on the harm of helicopter parenting. My newest book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, is a compassionate beckoning into living your best adult life. It's my middle book that brings me here today, though, Real American, a memoir in which I try to describe what it was like to be Black and biracial in mostly white spaces, dealing with microaggressions and racism for much of my life. Here are my thoughts about Juneteenth. Growing up, I was a tiny Black island in a sea of whiteness, and the one paragraph on slavery in my high school history textbook left a lot out. When I found out, I felt ashamed for not knowing. But then I remembered that those in power took their sweet time to tell our enslaved ancestors that they were finally free, just as those in power decide which truths to leave out of textbooks.
If you have never read Julie's memoir, Real American, you absolutely should. It is one of the most compelling memoirs you will ever encounter. Our next presenter is uniquely qualified to comment on Juneteenth and its relevance. Rhonda McGee is a professor of law at the University of San Francisco and an internationally recognized thought and practice leader focused on integrating mindfulness into higher education, law, social change work, and social justice. Rhonda is the author of numerous articles teaching about race using mindfulness. Her first book is The Inner Work of Racial Justice, Healing Ourselves and Transforming Our Communities Through Mindfulness. Please welcome Rhonda.
My name is Rhonda McGee, and I'm the author of The Inner Work of Racial Justice, Healing Ourselves and Transforming Our Communities Through Mindfulness. What Juneteenth means to me. To me, Juneteenth represents the coming together of 2 opposite things. The commemoration of it opens up celebration, celebrating the fact that our society has come a long way from one in which we formally sanctioned slavery. The now hideous notion that some people could legally be held in bondage for life by virtue of having been born in a body categorized as Black. And yet, the commemoration of it also yields sadness. Sadness as we recall what it took to end the systems of enslavement and the legal sanctions of them. Sadness as we soberly recognize the extent to which our culture remains enthralled in the fantasies about the meanings of so-called race and racial difference that support racist, dehumanizing practices and policies to this day. Thus, for me, sitting with and bearing witness to both of these is essential, and is why navigating these waters will always require something more than intellectualism, something with the power to hold this tension and not break, but grow deeper, stronger, more capable of alleviating suffering in our midst today, wherever we find it. Something like grace.
Thank you, Rhonda. That was fabulous. Next, Dante Stewart is a minister, essayist, cultural critic, and has a dynamic presence on page, on stage, and on social media. He is author of Shoutin' in the Fire, an American Epistle, named by Religion News Service as one of the 10 up-and-coming faith influencers. His work has appeared on CNN, in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and many, many more. Please welcome to the stage, Dante Stewart.
Yo, what's up, y'all? Hope y'all are well. My name is Dante Stewart. I am the author of Shouting the Fire, an American epistle. And I count it a deep honor and deep gratitude to be able to share a moment with you to both commemorate, celebrate, and remember and reflect on Juneteenth. I was recently reading Annette Gordon Reed's book on Juneteenth, which mixes memory and memoir, history, and hope. And what she wrote was that, this day, Juneteenth, was the day when Black people in Texas were told that slavery was ended. Only thing is, it was 2 months after the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed. And two years, after the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed, and 2 months after the last general had surrendered. And one of the things that I want us to kind of think about on this Juneteenth is that this project that we call America, this history, this drama that we are caught up in, it is one where Black people oftentimes did not get what we deserve. And it's one where we have to fight to retell the stories about our lives from our perspective. In my book, in the chapter American, I wrote about these American myths, and I talk about the ways in which we breathe toxic air, and the myths give us cover, and it gives the oxygen to the ways in which the American illusion of unity and diversity and democracy oftentimes evade us and kind of hides the ways in which, this country continues to harm us. And when I think about this day, I go back to Mr. Earl, who's a man from where I'm from in South Carolina, who is one of my grandfather's best friends, my late grandfather's best friend. My grandfather, he served in the military, and both Mr. Earl served in the military as well. And I was talking to him, and he told me the story that every time he goes on a cruise, he puts his feet in the water. And I, being someone who is curious, a curious individual, I asked him, okay, why do you do that? And he tells me, I put my feet in the water because I want to be reminded that every time my foot touched the water, somebody either swam here or somebody drowned. And then he looks at me and he tells me, when you look at yourself, you young, beautiful Black boy from the Black rural South who has now turned words into worlds, who have tried to further this American project of love and liberation, if indeed that is at the heart of it, or what we want to become. When you look at yourself, remember that somebody survived the swim. And when I think about that story, when I think about the survival of Black people, when I think about the ways in which we did not give what we deserve, it's hard to celebrate this day in that traditional term of celebration, especially when we're talking about regarding citizenship and democracy, where Black people in Buffalo were murdered and young children in Texas were murdered. And we still live in a country where guns matter more than people, power matter more than safety, and all these various inequalities are enlarging day by day. I find it hard to celebrate that this day. But what I do want to celebrate is our lives. That no matter what we as Black people have faced in this country, no matter what type of hills we have had to climb, no matter what type of roadblocks we have had to endure, we have always found a way to make it through, to make it against, and to make it around. And that's what I want to commemorate on this day, the ways in which we Black people have survived and do it again and again and again and again and again. And hopefully at some point, survival would not have to be the norm, but life, freedom, pleasure, peace will be. So I hope on this day we take moments to reflect on the meaning of Black life, the meaning of Black freedom, and the ways in which it should help us understand the meaning of what we call America itself. All right. Thank you. You take care.
Thank you, Dante. So appreciate your contribution. This program, I think, has been an uplifting and inspiring, insightful way to spend part of the Juneteenth holiday. We so appreciate the time and effort each participant has graciously given. and I am honored to be part of this program through organizing and hosting it. I want to also thank Bill and Elaine Petrocelli for allowing the space for such programming, and for other Book Passage staff that have supported this work, like Events Director Karen West and our tech guru producer, Zach Dubuque. Also, please remember that you can access any and all of the participants' books through Book Passage, and you definitely should. Support Book Passage and support these authors. We will keep their written reflections up on the website. Just go to bookpassage.com and navigate your way to the Juneteenth special page. In conclusion, please welcome composer, singer, multi-instrumentalist, arranger, producer, and performance artist Amelia Ray. Ray has self-produced 7 albums and several singles across different musical genres. In 2020, she organized the Quarantined Musical Festival, a series of 24-hour worldwide virtual music festival to benefit artists affected by COVID-19 cancellations. Her acclaimed single, Ham Bone Says, uses contemporary past aesthetic to explore racism, rage, and role reversal in the U.S. In honor of our program today, she is allowing us to share with you a song she wrote a few years ago in honor of the late, great writer Toni Morrison. With that, please welcome Amelia Ray. And thank you for being a part of this program.
Finding it hard to remain human. Don't know where to go, what to give. I search for the strength in your words to write the story of death. Even the heavens of Helsinki cry your name today, for the bluest sky has turned to gray. Every day another to pass, it's an uphill climb. Your voice told us there's still hope to believe in the future of time. Friend has lost her mother, we all have lost another who can tell our story true. Our beloved, wonderful. Even the heavens of Helsinki cry your name today, for the bluest sky has turned to gray. But can you tell me, can somebody tell me please, why when I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, I feel weak in the knees? But I refuse to be victim, prey to the net of despair. I'd rather hold up my neck and surrender to the end. give up all that weighs me down, try to fly my way out of this maze. Even the heavens of Helsinki cry your name today. For the blue sky is turned to gray. Even the heavens of Helsinki cry your name today. For the blue sky has turned.
Thank you, Amelia. She was actually joining us from Finland when she did that, and we really appreciate her staying up late to be a part of this programming. We also want to thank again all of you who are watching. We really appreciate your support. If you'd like to see more special events like this, please hit like and subscribe. Doesn't take you long, but it really makes a big difference for Book Passage. Thank you again, and happy Juneteenth.